And joining us now on the show, we want to bring in Lisa Berkey. She's the Executive Director for the Greater West Bloomfield Community Coalition, and Lisa Daniels-Goldman. She's a co-founder for the Jamie Daniels Foundation. They're part of the Jewish Addiction Resource Alliance. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Lisa Berkey, if we could start with you. Fill us in. I know we've talked before about the Greater West Bloomfield Community Coalition, but give us a background into the organization.
The coalition or the Jewish Addiction Resource Alliance?
How about both of them?
Okay.
Because does one fall under the other, or is there a coalition of everyone together?
So they're different. The Greater West Bloomfield Community Coalition is one of 21 coalitions in Oakland County, where we help our youth and our community with drug and alcohol prevention. We work with mental health, anti-bullying, anything that can help our youth grow to their greatest potential. And we also bring programming to parents and community members to help the youth. The way the Jewish Addiction Resource Alliance came about, I'm a member of putting the group together. There were many groups that got together and felt that the Jewish community needed a group like this. So I'm just one of them. There's also another coalition called Tri-Community Coalition, Henry Ford Maple Grove, the Jamie Daniels Foundation, Feinberg Consulting, Friendship House, and Jewish Family Service. We all work together to put together this alliance.
And that's great news, because we all need to come together in order to really help our community. And if we can now bring in Lisa Daniels-Goldman, you have a very personal and painful story with addiction. Can you share that with us?
I do. Back in December of 2016, my son, Jamie, passed away while he was in recovery in Florida. Since his death, we've come to learn much more about the world of addiction and just how corrupt it can be. Unfortunately, Jamie was patient brokered while he was in recovery and succumbed to his death that way. He struggled for a couple of years that we knew about, and we had a very difficult time finding help for him here in Michigan. And unfortunately, I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know that there were, when you Google something, you get beautiful pictures of beachfront property that were treatment centers, and not knowing what was just basically in our backyard. This group is very important to me at this point, the Jewish Addiction Resource Awareness.
But, and Lisa Daniels, staying with you on this conversation, the good thing I think that may come out of this pandemic is we are much more open to talking about the mental health issues and the addiction, because we know addiction is becoming more and more of a problem because of COVID-19 and the isolation. Do you think that by talking, it's helping not only your healing process for you and your family, but also the community?
There's no question that certainly people are talking about it more. I can tell you that back in 2015 and 16, you couldn't find the information that's available now. People weren't saying anything. And that was one of the main reasons. Jamie was in recovery, and we didn't want his to be, oh, here's another kid who died of an overdose. He tried. He really, really wanted help, and he wanted his health back. And unfortunately, we didn't get the help that we needed and as much as we needed. And to your point with mental health, addiction is a mental health issue. Kids today, and Lisa Berkey can attest to this, that kids self-medicate just to fit in. When you know that you're going from middle school to high school, or even younger, kids as young as middle school at 12 years old are vaping, are taking drugs. And these aren't illicit drugs. These are prescriptions that their parents or grandparents have in their medicine cabinets and very easily accessible. And somebody says, here, I took this, I felt better. Or you take something and don't feel inhibited and feel that you could now approach the cool group. It is so easy these days to get addicted to medication, sometimes just as many as 5 times ingesting a pill that, was told to be non-addictive, which we know now is addictive. Kids that are misdiagnosed, as Jamie was, with having ADD or ADHD and being put on Adderall. We know the effects that Adderall has on kids, and the kids know what effect Adderall has because they're dropping it in alcohol and just to get a high and, mixing these drugs. So it's certainly a conversation that we have to have. It is something that people still feel embarrassed about. We work hard at the Jamie Daniels Foundation to, get past the stigma of what addiction is. It is a mental health disease. It is a brain disease, and it is not something that anybody should be ashamed of. And that's what this group, the Jewish Addiction Resource Awareness Group that we put together is doing. Because if we can get into one community, our community of, the Jewish community, then we can branch out from there and people can realize that they are not alone. And I can tell you that nobody is alone in this. And whether you have a family member or a neighbor, I don't know anyone these days who doesn't know someone who is suffering or suffered a loss, or somebody who has gone through or in recovery at this point from addiction.
Lisa, Berkey, if we can kind of throw the conversation back your way, so many of our high school students and middle school students have been at home alone, many of them, during this time because of remote learning. Are you seeing an increased number of people in need of help right now, or do you anticipate it's going to catch up with us later?
I think it's going to catch up with us later. It's really hard to know. We assume it's happening, and from what we hear, but we haven't really been able to survey our youth or our parents. So I do believe that when we're back in the buildings next year and things are hopefully back to as close to normal as possible, and we can survey our kids like we do every other year, and we also survey our parents, we'll be able to see exactly what is going on. But from the coalition point of view, we're preparing for that, knowing that next year we're going to have to do a lot more education on drug and alcohol, vaping, mental health, just because this year has been so hard on them.
And how do we have the conversation? Because the kids know about this. So how do we have it as adults?
With other adults or with our kids?
With both.
Okay. With our kids, I think it's important that you start from a very young age, being age appropriate in the discussion, but making it a comfortable conversation in your home. It's not like all of a sudden when they're 12 years old, you bring up alcohol and drugs. It should be something that you've discussed. You've been a role model to your kids, showing what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, what's expected, what's not expected as a family. I know this sounds silly, but the more often a family has dinner together as a family, the less chance the kids are going to be trying drugs and alcohol. So it's just that family connection and the communication that really helps from a young age. As for adults talking to adults, I would hope we, like Lisa said, this is an illness. Addiction is an illness. We should talk about it just like we talk about diabetes or cancer or, any illness that somebody has. It should become a regular conversation. We shouldn't feel concerned about being embarrassed. It happens.
Lisa Daniels, how much do you think the doctors in the medical community hold responsibility for some of these cases that are happening across our country?
There's a loaded question. They do hold responsibility, but the pharmaceutical companies that produce the medications, that sold it to the doctors as non-addictive medications, knowing full well that it was, they need to take more responsibility than they have in, these lawsuits that have gone on. It's nothing. It's a spit in the bucket for what they've been fined and what they're paying to what they made. And yes, we do have many doctors within our community and certainly with, around the nation that have realized how much money is involved and how much can be made in addiction. But it doesn't stop at the doctors. It's doctors, it's labs, it's treatment centers. We've at the Jamie Daniels Foundation have been fighting this because unfortunately that's what patient brokering is. It's luring individuals who are in recovery. They're worth more being active in their addiction than they are in their recovery. The insurance fraud is beyond, it's immeasurable what people have made, and they don't call it $1 billion business for nothing. And I would just to add to what you said to Lisa is, parent education before their kids get in trouble. So don't wait until there's trouble in the family, or learn about what to see, what happens to a child. Don't wait until it's too late, because you'll never know. I can tell you from experience, I had no idea. And unfortunately, Jamie had been doing this. He was hazed in his fraternity. It's not just a matter of thinking, oh, my kids are going to try it. It's okay. I know they're going to do it. You just don't know what's going to happen. And when a kid wants to fit in, if they're feeling insecure, Jamie had suffered from anxiety and depression. We know what social media has done to kids and their psyche at this point, and very young. There have been stories very recently about, even a 16-year-old ordering drugs through Snapchat and dying, and his parents finding him in his room, and his mother was a well-known therapist. So, it is a daily struggle for everybody, but don't wait. Prevention is key.
And I think a part of that conversation too with the parents is to have these conversations. As you mentioned, I once did a story. There was an officer. He was a drug officer for the local police department. The mom was a nurse, and their son still died of an overdose. And they thought that they'd had these conversations and they were protected, but it's not just one conversation, it's an ongoing conversation. And with that, by having your conversation and starting this foundation, what has been the response from some of the parents and some of the kids?
From the Jamie Daniels Foundation or from the Jewish Addiction Resource?
From the Jamie Daniels Foundation.
Well, certainly, we were contacted very often. We have a monthly sort of get together called Jamie's Journey, just to discuss Jamie, tell people who he was, and talk about him and what the foundation has done. But it's certainly given people a voice where they didn't think they had a place to turn. Those that know about us, we get emails or phone calls, and we certainly reach out to anybody with the resources that we have, which is part of what this Jewish Addiction Resource Awareness that Lisa and I became part of, and getting these coalitions and foundations together to provide resources for people when we don't know where to turn. So you're not just told to Google it. Jamie was in recovery and in treatment, and upon his discharge, the therapist there told me to Google more information, rather than sending me out with a plan of action for him or, somewhere to go. And of course, he relapsed within 2 weeks. This isn't something, it's not a one and done. This is a lifetime of recovery for anybody, regardless of what your addiction is. So, obviously we're talking about prescription medication, where it came from, in Jamie's case and in many of these kids' cases, because that, again, is what's available to them in their parents' medicine cabinets. And that's why drug take-back days, there's another one coming up in April, are so important. And I can't tell you, for the number of drug take-back days that I've been present at certain locations, the quantity of prescriptions that have been collected in one household over the years from grandparents and parents, and it just keeps sort of moving down the line, is unbelievable. And like the tens of thousands of pounds that are destroyed by the police department is incredible. And it's really important. And again, Lisa will tell you that also prevention is key. Don't wait until it's too late to learn. And I did have those conversations, those dinner conversations with my kids. And, look what happened. We'll never recover. We will never heal by losing Jamie. But I can tell you that I can say his name every day. And if his story helps one person, then that's why the Jamie Daniels Foundation exists. And that's why I'm part of the Jewish Addiction Resource Awareness.
So Lisa, Berkey, I know you guys have an event coming up. Can you share that information with us?
Sure. It is on Monday, March 22nd, obviously via Zoom at 7 to 8:30 p.m. And we have a panel of people speaking. One is Lisa Daniels-Goldman. She'll be telling Jamie's story in more detail. We have someone else, a community member. His name is Ben, who's been in recovery for over 5 years. Ben will be telling his story. We also have Lisa Kaplan from Maple Grove. And we also have Rabbi Benny Greenwald, who is from the Friendship House. So each one will be discussing from their corner of the addiction world about how to help the people listening. We will talk about recovery. We'll talk about resources. This specific event will be through the Jewish lens, just because this is our starting event and we are the Jewish Addiction Resource Alliance, but anybody can benefit from listening to these people.
How important to add it into this conversation should we be talking about trying to decriminalize drug use?
To me or to the other Lisa, doesn't matter.
How about you? We're with you. How about we start?
Okay. I think that at least here in West Bloomfield, just so you know, that if someone is if EMS and police come to a West Bloomfield house and someone has overdosed, our West Bloomfield police officers aren't arresting them. What they care about is taking care of them and getting them to the right place and to into recovery. So they always, anytime we've had the West Bloomfield Police Department as part of a panel discussion, they'll always say that, parents tend to hide what was used to overdose, but that's kind of important when EMS shows up. They need to know what drug they've taken. So you don't have to hide it. They're not going to arrest them. They just want to help. So I would have to say that whatever will help the people that are addicted to these drugs and to get back into recovery, I'm all for.
We've had such a big push over, a few years about having, certain devices in high schools, in schools and churches. Should we include Narcan in those life-saving kits and have those pretty much everywhere?
I think so. We report up to ACHC, which reports to Oakland County Health Network, and they do free Narcan training, and we have those. In fact, last week we had one with Henry Ford, and we trained 17 people. And each person that is trained gets 2 doses of Narcan given to them. I think it's extremely important because Narcan isn't just for the person that knows somebody that is on drugs. When we get back to normal, it could happen when you stop at 7-Eleven for a Slurpee, when you're grocery shopping, when you're pumping gas. It can happen anywhere. So yes, I do think it's important that it's in places like churches and schools, anywhere people are everywhere normally, right? So I think Narcan's very, very important.
Lisa Daniels-Goldman, if I can put the conversation back with you, our condolences again on the loss of your son. Of course, this has been a huge story here locally, but you're helping so many people. Any last words that you want to share with other families that maybe are going through a similar situation?
Speak up. Whether it's calling your doctor, whether it's talking to your clergy, speak up, because now people have more access, more information, and they know where to turn. You can always check out the Jamie Daniels Foundation website. We do have a resource page that we're constantly updating, and places that are on there have been vetted. But really reach out for help, because help is there. Don't keep it to yourself. It's not going to go away. This is not something that somebody can get over, and it is not a moral failing. This is, people have to understand that it is a brain disease, and it's not a moral failing, and there are resources available, and we are willing to help. And I know that that help is available and recovery is possible.
Well, thank you both so much for being with us. You're listening to 88.1 WBLD Orchard Lake. As a reminder, the event is going to be Monday, March 22nd from 7 to 8:30. It is via Zoom, and you can register at jfsdetroit.org.